distinguished guest here, Jim Gray. He is the Libertarian vice presidential candidate. Yes, we have a key candidate running for president or vice president here in town today. Oh, there was Mitt Romney too. I forgot about him, but that was a private event. I doubt I'm going to get Romney or his eventual vice presidential pick on my program, but I'm delighted to have you here. I've had Gary Johnson, who was the presidential element of the Libertarian ticket, was on my program last year. And I got to admit, I was very impressed. I was surprised that he was ousted. Well, basically, he was a Republican when he was governor of New Mexico.
Well, he was a Republican governor, but he's always been a Libertarian.
Okay.
And honestly, Ed, first of all, thank you. It's nice to be with you. And secondly, when Governor Gary Johnson asked me to be his running mate, I was flattered and certainly proud, but he is the most qualified person to be President of the United States that I know of. And honestly, if I'd be able to have spoken to Sean and Leslie, who you're talking to just a few minutes ago, fine, articulate young men, you give me 10 minutes and I'm convinced that they would support Governor Gary Johnson also. We are in the political mainstream. We really are financially responsible, and I know that sounds strange in today's world. We are. We believe in fiscal responsibility. They haven't even had a budget in the last 2 years, and we will submit a balanced budget. And we're also socially tolerant.
So where does Gary Johnson stand on the war in Afghanistan?
No, it's time to leave. Okay. He and I both believe that we should have gone in originally. We were attacked not by Afghanistan per se, but by al-Qaeda, who they allowed to have this happen. We had every right, in my view, to go in and eradicate those people out. How Osama bin Laden got away from us originally, I don't know. But long since time for us to leave. Nothing positive is going to come out of there. Nothing positive is coming out of there. And not only that, Ed, and I will be, as far as I know, the only veteran, the only person that's been in the military in this national race. I was Navy JAG for 4 years. Actually was awarded a combat action ribbon in Vietnam on a training cruise. It's somewhat unusual. There's a story there. But we have military bases all around the world. Somewhere between 900 and 1,000 military bases, United States reservations, depending on how you define it. And if they're necessary for our security, by thunder, fine. In fact, reinforce them. But most of them simply are not. Let's bring those people home. We're making people mad at us. You know, I like Des Moines. I like New Zealanders. What if we had a New Zealand Army base here in Des Moines? Pretty soon we wouldn't like New Zealanders. And that's what we're facing all around the world. We can't afford it. We're making people mad at us. And there's a secret. And the secret is people don't usually shoot their trading partners. And China is finding that. They don't have military bases. They're beating us at our own game, and I hope we can talk about that.
And they're beating us at the Olympics, too.
Well, a little bit. I'm proud. That's an exciting thing.
But hey, folks, if you want to join the conversation, you're welcome to do so at 244-0077, or long distance, it's 855-244-0077. Jim Gray with the Libertarian Party is my guest. He is the vice presidential candidate on the ticket with former New Mexico Governor Gary Johnson. So a little bit about your background beyond your military service. What's your history look like?
Well, I'm a former federal prosecutor, and I was a judge in Orange County, California, conservative place for 25 years. Pretty much everything that can go wrong in society will come into my courtroom within that 25-year period. And honestly, I looked at what was going on in my own courtroom and saw we're churning low-level drug offenders through the system for no good purpose, and stood up back in 1992, 20 years ago, saying our nation's drug policy is not working. Let's put our heads together and change it. We, as a campaign, support the 3 initiatives, one in Colorado, one in the state of Washington, one in Oregon, to treat marijuana like alcohol. Here in Iowa, for heaven's sake, you're perfectly suited to raise hemp, an enormously profitable industrial crop.
It grows pretty well in the ditches.
Well, you know, the ditchweed and the rest. And this is a crop. We are now spending something $1 billion or $2 billion every year importing hemp from Canada. We're punishing our merchants. We're punishing our agricultural interests. We will treat it like cotton. I mean, these are things that we will stand up and do.
Well, and if I understand correctly, again, I've never been a pot user, but
me either.
But my understanding is that the ditchweed you would grow, essentially the crop you would grow for hemp production, is not the same as what you would want to smoke.
And that's right. You could get as much of a bang out of smoking hemp as you could the hat you're wearing, Ed. You know, it just isn't there.
Stay away from my hat.
Stay away from my hat. I mean the shirt you're wearing. You know, You're not wearing
the shirt's not special.
So there we go. I take that one back. But, these are things that we simply need to look at. And so, in fact, I gave to Sean and Leslie, there is a chart about Obama and Romney are the same on one side, we're different on the other. Healthcare, come on, wait a minute. Romney was the architect of Obamacare. You don't expect him to repeal it. It's galloping in the wrong direction. You're having the federal government take over our healthcare. The answer is no.
Well, the federal government is already very, very involved with healthcare.
And that's the problem.
So do away with Medicare and Medicaid?
Well, okay, let's talk them one by one.
Okay.
But with regard to health care, I was raised in the 50s, early 60s. It wasn't even a topic of conversation that we can't find reasonable health care for reasonable prices. We weren't closing emergency rooms. Things were going fine. And then LBJ started messing in with the system and put in Medicare, and now look at us. In fact, P.J. O'Rourke is the right guy to quote. Well, let me just finish that. He said, if you think health care is expensive now, wait till it's free. And he's right. Now, what you do is you bring back competition, but you do have a safety net, and that's where Medicare comes in, and you can have Medicare if you want to or not, but you have a safety net. But the difference is the federal government is the last resort instead of the first resort.
You're aware that Iowa has a single-payer health care system right now?
Okay, yes.
It's called Wellmark.
Okay.
Nearly 80% of all Iowans' health insurance premiums are with one corporation.
Okay.
To me, there are places where government needs to be involved. Education, defense, water quality, and healthcare is one of them.
Take education out of that equation, Ed. Education should not be involved in government.
So you would do away with public education?
No. That's not what I'm saying.
Okay.
I'm saying the federal government should not be in education.
I agree with that entirely.
And we've got to get them out of, not only local, it should be a parental issue such that the parents, let me ask you a question, your listeners, who is in a better position to decide where and how your children should be educated, you or the federal government? And that's a really easy question to answer.
Certainly the parents.
So allow the parents to choose where their education dollar is going to be spent.
Okay, well,
and then
what
they
options,
will demand excellence.
What options would a Jim Gray vice presidency and Gary Johnson presidency provide?
If we would allow the parents to choose where and how their children should be educated, if you have a school that is not performing, and today I think we would all agree our schools are failing our children in many ways.
No, I'm not going to agree with that.
In many ways. You haven't been to downtown Los Angeles and downtown Chicago and Washington, D.C.
Two kids went through the Des Moines public schools, and they're doing very well.
Your education dollar there, because there are some public schools that are doing wonderfully well.
The two kids I had on this program just before you, they're both products of the Des Moines public school.
Sean and Leslie are doing fine.
Yeah. I'm not saying there aren't problems, but to say that our schools are failing is an insult to the teachers and others who have worked hard to make them successful.
Fully understand. No, I overspoke that to some degree. There are some schools that are doing well, many schools that are not, and mostly it's not a question of money. You go to Washington, D.C., they're spending more money than they are here in Des Moines. But if you have a school that's not performing, and there are many of that, I'm sure you would agree, then the parents could choose to take their child to a school that was. What would that first non-performing school do? They'd look around and say, what's that other school doing that we're not, and get better, bring in innovation and better teaching. If not, they'd go out of business. Others would come in and would bring that innovation. We would get excellence back because the parents would demand it.
But what's wrong with this model? Parents are among the parents and other taxpayers who put the bill for public education.
Yes.
Elect a school board that oversees the management of that school district.
Excellent.
That's what we have now.
Well, and that's wonderful, except that you have the federal government who's also saying there's no child left behind and all the rest of that stuff.
I totally agree we should
get them out of there.
I agree with that.
Okay, then we're together.
But it doesn't sound like we are together. It sounds. It sounds like when you say you want to give parents the option.
Yes.
Does that mean they can take the money we currently spend on their students' enrollment in a public school and go to a private school?
Sure, if that's what they feel that they should do.
Okay,
absolutely.
So we're talking about a voucher program.
Yes. Voucher, scholarship, whatever you want to call it. The answer is yes.
And I see where that's going to lead is privatizing education.
Not necessarily. If the schools that are set up the way they are right now are performing, They'll continue exactly the way they are now. I think they'll get better. I think your teachers, good teachers, will be in demand. Today, even I'll bet you in your Des Moines school, it's top-heavy with administrators. Let's get the money where it really meets the road and on the teachers. And if you get into that sector where you demand excellence, you demand innovation, you'll receive it, and the good teachers will be in demand. They'll make more money. They'll be able to teach well. It'll be exciting.
Okay, so we've talked about foreign policy, the drug war, 100% agreement between us on those issues.
Good.
Some differences on health care and education. What are some of the other key issues that the Johnson-Gray ticket is bringing to the conversation?
First of all, as everybody should know, today for every dollar the federal government is spending, we're borrowing 43 cents. And this is done by the Democrats and the Republicans. Mm-hmm. We have a bipolar Congress, and it's simply out of control. As opposed to
bipartisan? I like that.
Yeah,
It's bad. It is bad.
We are going to do something really different because we're going to be a coalition government. We're going to have people highly placed in our administration, yes, that are libertarians and independents, but also Democrats, also Republicans, and anybody that buys into our financially responsible, socially tolerant policies will be a major part of it. And then when we have political problems with one of the other parties, we'll have people that are in them. Ed, you're in that party. You go tell your colleagues, this is a good idea, get on board. We'll give out credit where credit is due. You embrace a good idea, you'll get credit. We will work together to bring government to where it should be.
What did you think of the Bowles-Simpson Commission report on reducing the deficit?
We must reduce the deficit. We will submit a balanced budget to Congress. We will reduce spending submit a balanced budget that would reduce spending by 43%. And will we actually bring that to heel? We'll certainly try.
And I assume you would support taking a big chunk of that would come from military spending?
Yes, because we're
closing the bases, ending the war.
We're closing absolutely. A number of foreign bases are certainly not necessary for our security. I read a column recently, and a woman from Germany, from a small town where they had a U.S. Army base, was horrified. 92% of our village's revenues comes from the Army base, and I say, good. Let's spend them in Des Moines or San Diego or some other place. It is not necessary. I swear to you that Germany is not going to be attacked by Austria in my lifetime, and I don't think Japan's going to be attacked by the Philippines either. Let's bring these troops home. That's part of the 43 cents. We also have a whole lot of administration at the top level, a lot fewer at the ground level. So let's audit the Pentagon. Let's see where these monies go. Let's also audit the rest of the government. We will have what we call a sunset provision for all federal agencies. So every 5 years, every federal agency has to come independently, say, this has been our spending for the last 5 years. This is what we've done. This is what we plan to do in our budget for the next 5 years. And we can look at it. All companies do that. Federal government has almost never done that. There's too much waste there, duplication, and unnecessary regulation.
Okay, so you accomplished some reform in military spending in auditing that I presume identifies inefficiencies and over expenditures.
Duplication. Places we still have.
What about taxes, though? Are you talking? Do you
increase
taxes at all?
Okay, the answer. We need to bring jobs back. I think we would all agree. And you can look at Romney, you can look at Obama, and they're kind of nibbling at the edges and arguing, well, this person should have a tax break or higher taxes. We say, and it's not radical, but there's no soundbite for it, we will repeal the income tax. Now, bear me out. Why? First of all, the Government Accountability Office estimates that we're spending as private individuals or companies $250 to $600 billion every year to keep those records and to prepare your income taxes. That's money that would be saved already by the private sector. Good. But the major problem is our goods, be it manufactured or agricultural, are today working at a competitive disadvantage because they've paid taxes on them before we export them. Your corn here, your manufactured, the Chevrolets, whatever else, they're competing with goods around the world that have not. Similarly, the goods that are imported into our country are frequently have not paid taxes on them, competing with our domestic goods that have. Level the playing field. I was in an airplane recently, and I'm traveling a lot. I can't remember where or whatever. I sat next to an executive from Nike, the shoe manufacturer. Who
I've heard of them.
Judge Gray, indeed. Swoosh. Indeed, Judge Gray, if we were to repeal the income tax, most companies in our country would bring their manufacturing back to the United States of America. You talk about millions of
or it's
jobs.
somewhere else. And the problem, as I see it, is the income tax, if structured properly, is a more progressive tax than, say, the sales tax.
Okay. I told you there's not a sound bite because we have a response to that, too.
But I got to go to a break.
Okay.
Can you stick with us for the rest
Absolutely.
of the show?
Good. You'll have to kick me out.
Well, we will at about 1 o'clock because somebody else will be using the studio. We're broadcasting
We
here
can do that.
from the Webcast One studio across from Palmer's Deli in the Skywalk. My wonderful young producer, Matty Arrington, is keeping the show going forward. My guest here is Jim Gray. He's the Libertarian Party candidate for vice president. I've enjoyed talking with you, Jim. We've been talking about issues we agree on some, not all.
I don't even agree with myself all the time.
I want to ask you about one other issue, and then I want to talk politics. I mean, we're talking policy,
You betcha.
which is really what politics should be about, but we know that the job application, to get to the point where you can craft good policy, there are plenty of political hurdles to go through. But one more issue I want to ask you about. Well, two more. Campaign finance reform. Where do you and Governor Johnson stand on that?
I think that the whole Citizens United case was absolutely wrong-minded. I think that individuals, if I were Bill Gates...
You're saying that as a judge.
I'm saying that as a judge. And I can criticize the Supreme Court after it's final. If I were Bill Gates, I could run for office and spend my millions of dollars on myself. I think, Ed, that if Bill Gates decided that you were running for office, he should be able to spend an unlimited amount of money for you, too. He should publicize it. It should be public. And then if people think, oh, no, Ed Fallon is in Bill Gates' pocket, vote for your opponent. But the wealthy are going to be able to get around these rules anyway. Just look at the Democrats and Republicans today. Hundreds of millions of dollars. It's just obscene. So let's get... But corporations, let's get non-human entities out of this.
So do you disagree with Mitt Romney that corporations are people?
Well, I agree.
Should that be changed?
For some purposes, corporations are people under the 14th Amendment, and of course that's what they were saying in Citizens United. But the corporations can't vote. You know, there is a distinction between a non-human being and a human being, and that's where you draw these lines. So, yes, if you're going to be a corporation or any form of non-human being, you should get your shareholders to agree before you start spending their money. It's their money, and if they'd all agree, terrific, let them spend their own money.
So what about some of the initiatives that have been tried in Maine and Arizona and Connecticut and that some are pushing here in Iowa, voluntary public financing, where you have the option of having your campaign financed with a limited amount of money from a public source, the idea being that it eliminates the undue influence of special interests and corporate interests.
And if I, as a candidate, want to be a good guy and say, I won't solicit any money from anyone else, I'll just take the public financing and stay within those limits, you know, it's a pretty good suggestion.
Okay, so the Libertarian Party ticket supports that.
I don't speak for the Libertarian Party.
Okay.
And in fact, and it's got to be clear, when Governor Johnson asked me to be his running mate, he first of all, I said there's a condition, we run to win, and he fully agrees with that. And then he told me, you know, Jim, during the campaign, if your ideas are different than mine, feel free to discuss them. Okay. I mean, how many presidential candidates have you ever heard of that would be that self-confident without an ego to allow that to happen?
None.
I haven't discussed this particular issue with Governor Johnson. Okay. I don't know, and I certainly do not.
But you personally would support a public financing option.
I have run for office before. I have seen how money is much too important in these things.
What office did you run for before?
I ran actually as a Republican. I was a lifelong Republican until the passage of the so-called Patriot Act, which I see as a direct frontal assault on our civil liberties.
We agree with that 100%. Which
and
Obama
I left. Oh, he's embraced as his own. He signed the National Defense Authorization
I know,
Act.
we totally agree on that.
Guantanamo, drones. You know, you can use drones in our country, but only with a judicial warrant. I mean, that sort of thing. Our privacy is truly at risk. And now Mr. Obama is deciding death warrants for people in Pakistan or Somalia or whatever.
Well, Yemen recently.
Not in Yemen.
Well, let me ask you
about
climate change. That's an issue where I have butted heads with libertarians on before. And in fact, I think I mentioned to you during the break that I was at a libertarian conference in Pennsylvania. I was the lone former Democrat Occupy person invited to be at that. And the speaker asked, who even believes the EPA should exist? And I was the only one in the audience in this vast theater who raised my hand saying, yeah, I think the EPA has a role to play in protecting our water and whatnot.
Ed, it's a balance. In many ways, property values, property ownership, addresses those. You can look in England at the trout streams, which is, where did he come from this, he says. But in England, if I am downstream and you pollute the stream upstream, I can sue you. And they have very clear and good trout streams.
Yeah,
property values work.
Yeah.
But that's finite. You can see where that water is flowing, with air, with underground water. Those are things where you need the government to be involved. And the EPA is doing some of that. So it's a balance. I think the EPA is overdone in some ways and underdone in others.
So with regards to climate change, what is the government's role in addressing that issue?
Again, it's a balance. Yes, I think it's clear that the world is getting warmer. Now, whether that's cyclical and it's happened over history, which of course it has, the question is,
but not this fast.
The question is, how much does mankind, probably burning fossil fuels, contribute to that? And I think the answer is it does. So then the question is, okay, well, we could go back to the horse and buggy era, which, by the way, brings a lot of methane and stuff too. You need to look at as a benefit and risk analysis, and then what we can do that is helping enough that we don't bankrupt ourselves, etc. So it's a balance, and that's where government stands.
Horse and buggy has its appeal, but I would recommend bicycles.
I saw your bicycle out here, so I should have said
light
that.
rail, Amtrak, and maybe more buses as well.
Well, let's
and
not
smarter
have
cars as well.
Let's not have Amtrak
vehicles.
owned by the government. We're fighting this high-speed rail thing in California
so
now.
Would you want? Should we end public subsidies for roads as well?
No.
But why should we not do something to help?
It's a balance, Ed. It's a balance.
Okay,
I'm not saying we're not going to do something for it. We could even give them a bounty. If you want to put in a high-speed rail between Los Angeles and San Francisco, and it is worth it to us to pay $2 billion to the first person that puts that in, and once done, we see, it's worth $2 billion to us, do it. But the government should not be in Amtrak. The government should not be running.
But the government paid, it is responsible for the interstate highway system, the state and county road system. The government is responsible for that.
Working pretty well.
Okay, so why not government being involved with trains as well?
Okay, because the trains have moving parts. I wouldn't have the government putting in the roads. We have Caltrans in California, which is the state owning dump trucks and the rest. I would do that by the private sector, much more efficient, much less administrative, etc. As far as the roads, once they're in, there's not many moving parts. With trains, there are lots of moving parts, and it's just a different beast. So I think that the interstate highway system is a good one. Hooray for Eisenhower. And a lot of them you could land planes on. That was all decided to. It's a balance.
Yeah, and I think European and Japanese and Chinese train systems are fantastic.
Oh, I fully
love
agree.
to see us have that here.
I've been on them in France and China.
Yeah.
They're wonderful, but
and
they should not be run
by the guy. They're invested in the taxpayers.
It's a balance, but they should be run privately. Okay, that's just my view. Amtrak is a failure. It would work a lot better if it were private.
I think it would work a lot better if it was on a level playing field with the interstate highway system myself. But let's move on.
Let's
move on. Politics. This is commonly referred to, our political system is commonly referred to as a two-party system. There's a reason. It's almost. I mean, when was the last time
Ross Perot was in the debates in 1992.
He was in the debates, right? He got 19% of the vote. Some say he spoiled the election for Bush. Others say he took equally from Clinton and Bush. But we have a system that is not very friendly to third-party candidates. And even people right now who might like what you're saying, or who might like what the Green Party candidate is saying, Jill Stein, I believe her name is, are going to say, well, it would be throwing my vote away. I'm going to have to vote for Obama or Romney.
And that's a huge issue. Ross Perot in 1992 was polling at 7% and then was in the debates. Everyone agrees, I think they were more interesting, more substantive. When we are in the debates, we are going to force Mr. Romney and Mr. Obama to discuss issues they do not want to discuss.
They were certainly more entertaining.
And more entertaining, too, and that's true.
For those who remember Ross Perot.
We are dividing our election into two phases now. By the end of September, we're going to have to be polling at enough to be in the debates. After that...
And what is that threshold?
Well, right now, after Ross Perot, the Republicans and Democrats got together and founded this Presidential Elects Commission, and now they say you have to have 15%. When we're ready with a lawsuit if we have to, because it's so critical to us and the American people to be able to have that third voice in there. We're the only other party that will be on the ballots of at least 48 and probably 50 states. We can be there and will.
How many states will the Green Party ticket be on? Do you know?
I do not know, but they won't be on enough technically even to win enough.
Some of them are
electoral
very, very hard
college
to get
votes.
on.
Well, yeah, because the Republicans and Democrats sit in there. They want to keep you away.
They have structured
but the people want this to happen. So we tell our folks, and the good folks here in Iowa. In fact, I'm asking you, Ed, if somebody were to call you from a polling organization, first of all, don't hang up. And secondly, keep your vote to yourself at the moment. Say, I support Governor Gary Johnson. Get us in those debates. And once we are, if we're seen as viable, this man is the most qualified person to be president of the United States that I know of. He has more administrative experience than both Romney and Obama combined. He was successful. He left the state with $1 billion surplus. He's financially responsible and socially tolerant. We'll win your debate. We will win your votes.
How are you and Gary Johnson polling in? Is Zogby and Rasmussen, for example, are they even bothering to include you in their polls?
Yes. Zogby's last poll was about 2 weeks ago that I know of. We were at 5.3%.
Nationally?
Nationally. That was a national poll.
State by state, did they break it down?
The answer is I don't know.
Okay.
I saw the national results. They probably did, but we are going to be able to get the Ron Paul supporters. I'm convinced. I will be in Tampa at the Paul Fest, etc.
Will you be able to get Ron Paul?
I don't know.
Honestly, he's been a libertarian before.
He wants to hand the torch off to his son Rand, I'm sure.
Who is supporting Romney?
Well, I heard Rand Paul talk, and he said, when he was running for Senate in Kentucky, that he had to promise that he would support the eventual nominee, so that by that time it was a matter of integrity. I buy into that. I understand. That's politics and the rest.
Do you think his dad had to slap him around after that, or what?
I'm shocked. I couldn't believe it, but one way or the other,
we
are the same family as the
So
Ron Paul supporters. We stand for very much the same thing as they. We're all in that same family. And so that'll bump us up to 10%, I'm convinced. And then, for example, the people they call them Persians, the people from Iran, both Romney and Obama are seriously talking about bombing Iran, going to war with Iran. We say, no, unless Iran attacks us or our allies, we're not going to do that. So the people who are here from Iran don't want us to bomb their families, don't want us to go to... We are their voice. People in medical marijuana dispensaries all around the country are handing out Governor Gary Johnson literature, because the only way we will have any hope of a medical marijuana dispensary or progress with regard to this failed and hopeless war on drugs is to vote for Governor Gary Johnson. Mr. Obama is hypocritical like the day is long. I even read his book, and he said while he was in Chicago, he was using marijuana pretty regularly. He even used cocaine. And if he were here right now, or that's what he said in his book, and that if he were here right now, Mr. President, would this help your career to have been arrested or convicted of any of this? He said, according to Mr. Holder, his Attorney General, we're not going to prosecute medical marijuana people that are in compliance with local law. Now they are. I don't know what Mr. Obama believes. It's all political. I don't know what Mr. Romney believes. He'll say anything to get elected.
Well, I certainly would say that of Romney. I don't know if I'd say the same of Obama. I think you're going to be. I know there are plenty of Democrat and independent types who have empathy with much of the libertarian philosophy, but that
we're in the mainstream.
Think that it goes too far in many accounts. But anyway, I love to continue this conversation. I can't. I've got to wrap up the show.
Okay.
And I really appreciate you being with us.
It's a privilege. I will be the only veteran in this election. I'm the only Peace Corps volunteer that will be elected in this office. It's proud to be here. We'll do it again.
And would love to get Gary Johnson on the program as well again. I had him on, like I said, about a year and a half ago. So
he's a good man.
Back when he was running as a Republican.
Okay, fair enough.
Jim Gray, folks, Libertarian Party candidate for vice president. Been a good conversation, an interesting one, and you can check out the campaign's website at
GaryJohnson2012.com.
GaryJohnson2012.com, and you can check out my website for podcasts of this program and other programs at FallonForum.com.